My name is Charlotte, and for 5 torturous years, my identity was reduced to a mere number, employee 183. This is the story of how I transformed the deepest humiliation into my greatest triumph and discovered that our wounds often become our most profound sources of wisdom. It was the autumn of 2017 when I first stepped through the glass doors of Thornfield Industries, one of Manchester's most prestigious pharmaceutical companies. The grey October sky seemed to mirror my nervous excitement as I walked through the industrial quarter, past the old Victorian mill buildings that had been converted into modern offices. I had just completed my degree in biochemical engineering at Imperial College London, and my heart raced with anticipation. I believed my dedication and talent would be recognized immediately. On my first day, my supervisor, Mr. Harrington, a stern man in his early 50s with the demeanor of someone who had forgotten how to smile, barely looked up from his clipboard. "You're number 183, he said matter-of-factly, his Yorkshire accent cutting through the air like a cold blade. "We don't use names for junior staff here. It's more efficient for tracking productivity." I remember the taste of that moment, bitter as overbrewed Yorkshire tea. My cheeks burned with embarrassment, and something inside me shattered like delicate china hitting stone. But I forced a smile, telling myself it was merely a temporary arrangement. The office was a sterile environment of gray cubicles arranged in perfect rows beneath harsh fluorescent lighting. Each morning at precisely 8 o'clock, I would scan my ID card and take my place at workstation 183. Colleagues would greet me occasionally, but always with that number. "Morning, 183, how's the weather? 183, could you pass these files along?" The first few months felt like psychological torture. During team meetings in the wood-paneled conference room overlooking the Manchester skyline, when Mr. Harrington called upon staff to present their projects, I would hear, "183, your analysis on compound synthesis. Never Charlotte, never my name." It was as though my personality, my dreams, my very essence had been erased with bureaucratic efficiency. My family, during our Sunday roasts in our Cotswolds cottage, struggled to understand my distress. "Charlotte, at least you've got steady employment," my mother would say whilst carving the beef. "In these uncertain times, that's rather fortunate." My father, who had run a small engineering firm in Reading for 25 years, would shake his head thoughtfully. "Work is work, love. The important thing is to conduct yourself with integrity and do your duty." But I felt as though I was disappearing piece by piece, day by day. Each evening, riding the train back from Manchester Piccadilly to my small flat in Didsbury, I would catch my reflection in the carriage window and see a woman I no longer recognized. My eyes, once bright with possibility, now seemed as grey as the Manchester rain that perpetually fell against the glass. The winter of 2018 was particularly brutal. The northern winds seemed to cut straight through to my soul, and I felt equally frozen inside. During one especially humiliating meeting, Mr. Harrington reprimanded me in front of the entire team because I had dared to question our quality control procedures. 183, you're here to follow protocols, not to philosophize, he said with a dismissive wave. Leave the thinking to those with proper experience. That evening, I returned to my small Victorian terrace flat and wept until no tears remained. I stood before my bathroom mirror and whispered, "Who are you, Charlotte? What's left of you?" The answer was deafening silence. Yet something profound was stirring within me. Like a dormant seed beneath winter frost, a quiet determination was taking root. I began to observe everything with different eyes, noticing inefficiencies in our research protocols, waste in our procedures, problems that everyone seemed to ignore or dismiss. During lunch breaks at the local pret-a-manger, instead of commiserating with colleagues, I began to study. I always carried a notebook where I jotted down ideas, observations, potential solutions. In the evenings, in my flat overlooking the tree-lined streets of Didsbury, I studied pharmaceutical manufacturing optimization and quality management. It became my form of silent rebellion. James, a colleague from the IT department, was the only person who occasionally used my actual name. During a coffee break, he remarked, "Charlotte, I've noticed you're always taking notes. What are you plotting?" I smiled for the first time in months. "I'm simply observing," I replied. "Sometimes solutions hide in the details everyone else overlooks." The year 2019 arrived with Brexit uncertainty casting shadows over every industry. Our company struggled to adapt to new regulations and supply chain disruptions. Many processes that seemed robust revealed themselves as fragile as a house of cards. During a particularly tense video conference, I watched Mr. Harrington perspire whilst attempting to explain to the board why our productivity had plummeted by 35%. It was in that moment that I found the courage to speak. "Pardon the interruption," I said, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. "I'm employee 183, and I believe I've identified several structural issues that might explain our current difficulties." The silence that followed was heavier than Manchester fog. Mr. Harrington stared at me with incredulous eyes. "183, this isn't the time for your amateur theories," he said sharply. But the managing director, Sir Edmund Blackwood, raised his hand. "Wait, Harrington, let her speak. At this juncture, we need every possible insight." I took a deep breath and began to present what I had observed during 2 years of enforced silence. I spoke about bottlenecks in our research pipeline, inefficiencies in our quality assurance system, hidden costs that no one had ever calculated. I proposed a complete restructuring of our operational flow, based on lean manufacturing principles I had studied during those solitary evenings. As I spoke, I watched expressions change around the conference table. Mr. Harrington appeared to shrink in his chair, while Sir Edmund took notes furiously. "These projections are accurate?" he asked, studying my calculations for potential cost savings. "Yes, Sir Edmund. I've verified everything multiple times. With these modifications, we could reduce operational costs by 32% and increase efficiency by 45% within 8 months. The meeting concluded in stunned silence. The following day, I received a call from Sir Edmund himself. 183. "Forgive me, what's your actual name?" "Charlotte Pemberton, sir." "Charlotte, I'd like you to coordinate the implementation of your proposals. You'll have a team of 12 and direct access to me." The months that followed were a whirlwind of transformation. I worked 16-hour days, but for the first time in years, it wasn't suffering. It was passion incarnate. Each morning, I awakened with the energy of someone building something genuinely meaningful. The team assigned to me was initially skeptical. Margaret, a veteran researcher with 20 years' experience, told me on the first day, "Young lady, I've been here since before you were born. I've seen many graduates arrive with grand ideas only to disappear within months." "Margaret," I replied, "I'm not here to disappear. I'm here to remain and ensure we all work more effectively together." Gradually, I earned their trust, not through authority or commands, but by listening to their experiences, valuing their expertise, transforming my theoretical ideas into practical solutions that made their work more meaningful and efficient. During the summer of 2019, whilst Manchester enjoyed one of its rare sunny spells, results became undeniably visible. Productivity had increased by 42%, waste had decreased by 55%, and for the first time in years, the company was recording record profits despite the economic uncertainty surrounding Brexit. One evening in July, whilst working late in the nearly empty office, Mr. Harrington approached my desk. He appeared to have aged considerably. "Charlotte," he said, and it was the first time he had spoken my name. "I owe you a profound apology. I completely underestimated your capabilities." I looked up from my documents. "Mr. Harrington, there's no need for apologies. What matters is that we're now working together for the company's benefit." But within me, I felt a complex mixture of satisfaction and melancholy. Satisfaction for the belated recognition, melancholy for all those lost years, for all those humiliations that had nearly broken my spirit. Autumn arrived with its golden hues painting the Manchester canals, and with it came news that would change everything. The company had received an acquisition offer from a German pharmaceutical giant. It was a fantastic opportunity, but there was a condition. The buyer wanted assurance that our productivity improvements were sustainable and not merely temporary success. Sir Edmund called me to his office on the 20th floor with panoramic views of the Manchester skyline. "Charlotte, you have 6 months to demonstrate that what you've created can be replicated and maintained long-term. If you succeed, this acquisition will make us all rather wealthy. If you fail—" He didn't finish the sentence, but the implication was clear. The future of the company and hundreds of families depended on me. The subsequent months were the most intense of my life. I traveled between all company facilities, from Edinburgh to Plymouth, implementing my system at every location. Each morning I awakened with the weight of that responsibility, but also with a determination I had never experienced before. During this period, I met Dr. Sarah Webb, an organizational psychologist the company had engaged to manage employee stress during the transition. "Charlotte," she said during one of our sessions, "what you've accomplished isn't merely improving processes. You've transformed this company's culture. You've demonstrated that every person has value, regardless of the number assigned to them." Her words touched something profound within me. I realized that my experience hadn't been merely a personal trial, but a symbol of how human value is too often reduced to numbers, statistics, identification codes. The winter of 2020 was the period of final assessment. The German inspectors arrived with their tablets and precise questions. They analyzed every process, interviewed every employee, verified every piece of data. I accompanied them like a proud guide, showing not just improved numbers, but most importantly, the people who had been transformed. Margaret, the skeptical veteran from the first day, now led an optimization team with the enthusiasm of someone half her age. "You see," she told the inspectors, "we no longer work like automatons here. We work as a family with a common purpose." The evening before the final decision, I couldn't sleep. I walked through Manchester's northern quarter, past the converted warehouses and trendy cafes, reflecting on all those years of humiliation. The mornings when I didn't want to leave my bed, the evenings when I cried from frustration, the moments when I considered surrendering. But I also thought about the people I had encountered along the way. James, who had shown faith when no one else did. Dr. Webb, who had helped me understand the deeper meaning of my struggle. Margaret, and all the other colleagues who had grown alongside me. On March 10th, 2020, Sir Edmund convened all employees in the main auditorium. The atmosphere was tense as a violin string. "I have the pleasure to announce," he said solemnly, "that Thornfield Industries has been officially acquired by Berlin Farm for $750 million. The auditorium erupted in thunderous applause. But then Sir Edmund raised his hand for silence. This acquisition wouldn't have been possible without the extraordinary work of someone we failed to value as she deserved for far too long. Charlotte Pemberton, please join me on stage." My legs trembled as I climbed the steps. I looked at my colleagues' faces, some smiling, others still incredulous. Mr. Harrington sat in the front row with an expression I couldn't quite define. Perhaps respect, perhaps shame for how he had treated me. "Charlotte," Sir Edmund continued, "you haven't merely saved this company, you've demonstrated that an organization's true value lies in its people, not in numbers. Therefore, I'm proud to announce that you'll be our new Director of Operations for all of Europe." I felt a shiver run down my spine. The young woman who had entered 5 years earlier as number 183 was now responsible for thousands of employees across the continent. But the most significant moment came when I took the microphone. "Thank you," I said, looking at all those faces that had seen only a number for years. "But I want everyone to know something important. I didn't save this company alone. We saved it together, as a team, as a family." I paused, searching for the right words. For 5 years, I was number 183. And you know what? I'm grateful for that experience, because it taught me that our identity never depends on how others see us, but on how we choose to see ourselves. My voice cracked slightly. Every person in this room has a name, a story, dreams. And my first act as director will be to permanently eliminate the employee numbering system. From today, each of you will be called by name, because every name carries the dignity and value of a human being. The applause that followed was different from the previous one. It was warmer, more sincere, more human. I saw tears in many colleagues' eyes, people who for years had been reduced to simple numbers like myself. After the ceremony, whilst everyone celebrated with the reception provided by the company, Mr. Harrington approached me. "Charlotte," he said with a tremulous voice, "I've reflected extensively on these years. The way I treated you was wrong, and I'm deeply ashamed." I looked at this man who for so long had represented everything I despised about the corporate world, and felt the anger I had nurtured for years transforming into something different. Not compassion, not yet, but perhaps understanding. Mr. Harrington, I replied, we all make mistakes. What's important is being willing to change and grow. That evening, I returned home with a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. Genuine pride. Not the arrogant pride of defeating enemies, but the profound pride of someone who had transformed suffering into wisdom, humiliation into strength. I called my parents to share the news. My mother wept with joy over the phone, and my father, with his gruff but emotion-laden voice, said, I'm proud of you, love, not for the success, but for how you maintained your dignity even in the most difficult moments. The first months in my new role were challenging but incredibly rewarding. I traveled between offices in Berlin, Paris, Madrid, Barcelona, always with the same objective, transforming not just production processes, but the corporate culture itself. During a meeting in Berlin, the CEO of Berlin Farm, Herr Müller, took me aside. Frau Pemberton, he said in his precise English, what you accomplished in Manchester is impressive, but there's something that intrigues me even more. What's that, sir? The way your employees speak of you. It's not respect for authority, it's something deeper. It's respect for the person. How did you achieve this? I smiled, thinking of all those years of suffering that now finally found meaning. Herr Müller, when someone is treated as a number for years, they learn to see human value in every individual. I simply treated others as I wished to be treated myself. A year after my promotion, I received an unexpected phone call. It was Mr. Harrington, who had meanwhile taken early retirement. Charlotte, he said uncertainly, I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but my daughter has just finished university and is seeking employment. Could you perhaps offer her some guidance? The request surprised me, but I agreed to meet the young woman. Emma Harrington had her father's eyes, but hers were filled with the hope and uncertainty typical of youth. During our coffee in a cafe near Manchester Cathedral, she confessed her fears. Charlotte, she said, my father told me how he treated you initially. He's deeply ashamed of what he did, and I'm afraid of becoming like him. I looked at this 23-year-old and saw myself years earlier. Emma, I said, your father made mistakes, that's true. But what's important isn't never making mistakes, it's learning from them and ensuring they serve some good purpose. I offered her an internship in my division, not to please her father, but because I saw in her the potential and vulnerability I recognized in myself. Today, as I write this story from my office on the 22nd floor, overlooking Manchester's ever-changing skyline, I reflect on the entire journey that brought me here. The city stretches before me like a mosaic of lights and opportunities, and I'm no longer the frightened girl who entered as number 183. But the most important lesson I've learned isn't about professional success or recognition. It's about the transformative power of resilience and compassion. Every time someone tries to reduce us to a number, a category, a limiting definition, we have a choice. We can accept that definition, or we can demonstrate that we are so much more. Last week, during the monthly meeting with all European directors, I shared a reflection that came spontaneously. You know, I said, 5 years ago I was known as number 183. Today I direct operations for a billion-pound company. But the real transformation wasn't in my title or salary. It was in understanding that our value never depends on how others see us, but on how we choose to see ourselves and others. Herr Müller nodded thoughtfully. That's a lesson we should all learn, Frau Pemberton. But the story doesn't end there. Last week, I received a letter that changed everything. It was from a young man in Birmingham who had learned of my story through an article on LinkedIn. Dear Charlotte, he wrote, I work at a company where they only call me by my badge number. Your story has given me the strength not to give up. Thank you for proving that everything can change. In that moment, I understood that my experience had significance beyond Thornfield Industries' boundaries. It had touched the lives of people I didn't know, given hope to those who felt invisible, demonstrated that human dignity can always triumph over bureaucratic indifference. Yesterday evening, during dinner with my family at our favorite gastropub in the Cotswolds, my father looked at me with glistening eyes. Charlotte, he said, when you were small, I'd watch you play in the garden and imagine you'd do great things. But I never imagined you'd do something so human. What do you mean, Dad? I mean you haven't just succeeded. You've kept your soul. As I return home this evening, passing through Manchester's illuminated streets, I think of all the people who, at this moment, feel reduced to numbers, codes, statistics. I want them to know their story isn't finished, that their value doesn't depend on external recognition, that every day is an opportunity to demonstrate who we truly are. My story isn't exceptional because I succeeded in business. It's important because it demonstrates that every human being has the power to transform humiliation into strength, pain into wisdom, invisibility into authentic leadership. And when I look in the mirror now, I no longer see number 183. I see Charlotte Pemberton, a woman who learned that true power doesn't lie in dominating others, but in liberating the potential that exists in every person. A woman who discovered that our deepest scars can become the source of our brightest light. This is my story. The story of how 5 years of humiliation transformed into the foundation of my most authentic strength. And if you're living your version of number 183, remember, your story isn't finished yet. The best is yet to come.